Hey there, I thought it'd be fun just to run that quick, even though I'm not going to show you the back side, just to demonstrate how handy this squaring block is on the table here. And a lot of times, it's a great thing where we use these toe clamps. I think it's this Allen key right here that holds those down against the table. Oh, I guess the contrast would be better if I didn't have that. It's that Allen keys in my hand. As you can see. So that goes down, that compresses all these together. So this is my video on some of the favorite tooling I have for the milling machine. Now, not only does this square the stock, it also shows me how far I can put it while still being able to clearly get a full sweep on this 3-inch shell mill holder. So if this, for instance, was all the way down here, that wouldn't have gone across the face. So I like it as a stop in that sense too. And there's also a couple holes over here which allow that to be bolted up, and to put a spacer in here if these all needed to get done the same size, and we're doing a lot of repeaters there. So that's the horizontal mill as far as the finer points of how it gets used most of the time. Go over to Bridgeport Universal here and show you all the little fixings we got. So one of the things I made years ago is, see this thing here, if we can get it focused, is an adjustable quill stop. You can see the threads inside there. So basically I made it like a washer, drilled it through, tapped it, and then milled this slot in it with an end mill with it just sitting up in the vise. And then to make sure it had as much thread coming past and it wasn't just a half thread, is I held this in a hydraulic press while pressing a bolt down from the top in order to make sure, and you can see in there somewhere how it's got little thread marks even out past where it would have been initially threaded. So that's super handy, especially if you're someone who goes from shop to shop and you don't have, this one here is one of those quick nuts. So it's got a little detent you can press in and move the nut up and down. But if you don't have that, super handy because you just put that on there and automatically you have your depth stop that keeps you from going too far and drilling into your vise and doing whatever else. So one of my other favorite things is if you get one of these ratcheting wrenches, this one here is a Mac, made in USA, and the handy thing is 3/4 on one end, 7/8 on the other. So when you have your T-slot nuts like these, 7/8 end works on there, and then all the milling machine nuts, for instance, all the ones for the tilting of the head, the one on the drawbar at the top, all you use is this 3/4 inch end. As well as if you ever happen to take your handle off your vise, that's also 3/4 inch. So that's a new vise handle. I have some footage somewhere I was going to put on Instagram and never got around to it. So I did it with an extra hole here as well as the 3. The 3 is really nice because it allows, in any position, being able to use 2 hands to tighten or loosen, which, without having as much leverage on there, it's nice to be able to use 2 hands to crank it down or to have more control loosening it. So that's a nice thing that I was really missing out on before, because the original Kurt handle hangs too low and hits the Y axis knob there, which is a real pain. So moving on, next favorite thing, got these blocks. These are 2 7/8. If I did them again, I would have add the top ground, well, I would add the top and bottom ground to size and match that up with that matches the vise height here. So any standard vise is 2 7/8 as far as I've ever seen. It's where it's nice if you go with a Kurt or something that's standardized. So these are the same. So any work that's long can rest in the vise, and these can go wherever on the table. Sometimes they're handy for other things as well. Next thing from my apprentice days, used to make a lot of these. These are made out of steel shafting and a half-inch hole, different thicknesses. Always handy if you don't have the right setup or need to make a little stop. Sometimes something like this thing here, might use that on there. Might use it on top of a hold down set to get the studs, if the studs aren't the right length. Or sometimes when I had studs, I don't know if you ever do this trick here, where you get the spring on the stud to hold the clamp up if you're changing parts out, if you can't do stuff in a vise, then that washer's nice as far as helps set up that spring. Anyhow, that's on a tangent. The other thing that's really important to do, you can see a sample. This is the key. This is, I think, 3/4 at the bottom and then 5/8 for the table here. And that's a length of key we made up to do any of these vices. Because you take your vise on and off the machine. I know I always avoid taking vices off, but it's even worse if they're not keyed, because then you got to start dial indicating them, which I'm good at dial indicating, but even then, I got other things to do with my time than dial indicate vices. Apparently I got time to make keys. Next thing, really love, are these 5/8 T-slot stops. So anytime you want to square a piece up on the table, say, oh, getting sloppy here. Say we want to square this up on the table, you put one there. These are ground to size for a previous milling machine. Find some variance from machine to machine. So that would square that block up beautifully right there. Another thing, wide parallels. These are super handy. These are just actually cold rolled steel that I ground back when I was in school. And they're super handy. You can put them in the vise and or build up a bit of height there. The one thing they're really nice on is if keying shafts or holding shafts in the vise, where it's just a nice thing to put underneath. It's ground, doesn't mark things up, keeps things good and square, and you wouldn't be able to use 1/8 inch parallels for a piece of round bar. So that's one of those things that these are super handy size. These are, I got a tape measure here. Oh, apparently those are about 7/8 as well. Those are 7/8 by half, and they're just under 6 inches long. Might as well go full on 6 inches. The other thing I made years ago is this. It's keyed on the bottom, and you can put in whatever you want for studs or socketed cap screws to make a work stop. So if there's a piece in the vise, you can always hit that. I've used that a lot on different, used to do a lot of round bars that had some holes in the ends. So that was a big thing back in the day. And put a stud down through the top. I would have designed it a bit different if I did it again, but it still comes in handy time to time. The other week when I was doing this, I had, you can see right there where I had tightened on, is a 1/2 inch bolt with a nut on it. And then I had this. I had it on the angle I wanted for these. And I've got some photos of that that'll be on Instagram sometime sooner than later. And I think that wraps it up. Yeah, I can't think of anything else that I do a lot on the milling machine other than using that stuff. A couple of the other things that I've done over time that have really been helpful, you can see in the back here, is this bracket here for the apron, and there's just a flat bar in the back of the table. That's really nice for keeping chips off of the ways, and it's easy to just flip it up there and you can dump those chips off. And putting the digital readout on, that's one of the key things. It's a big time saver. This one here I like. It's Fagor, and It's got a lot of zeros or uh, datums, I guess we call it. I don't know if you can see here. And the importance with that is that from person to person, everyone can set their own datums for their own jobs and do things that they like. And because you could even have adding this little clip on here, this is a big thing, to either hang your drawing from, or if there was multiple people using the same machine, I would say we'd all have our own datums, because that way we can all reference whatever we want at any given time when we know it's the same. As long as we're leaving the vise on there, it's a pretty easy thing to do that way. And got a little magnet on here for the chuck key if I ever get there. Oh yeah, that I want to improve. That does not really, I never really think to use that. And yeah, that's the milling machine. Someday it'd be nice to get a power drawbar. Hasn't happened yet. I can't say it's the biggest priority. A lot of times just this machine seems like gets used for drilling most of the time. But you know, there's the tooling over here. Maybe we go through that quick too. It's not the fanciest plywood stand, but it's important to have all these Torx drivers here handy, have the right sizes, typical collets. I like these Weldon holders. These ones here in particular, they're Bison. They're good, Polish made. And I like these inserted. These ones aren't the best. They're, oh, trying to think what the heck they are. This one here, the cheap triangular TPG, whatever they are, inserts. This is the old standby. Anytime there's a job that involves taking off weld or just stuff that's got an interrupted cut, that's a super good thing to have. Got a smaller version that's got 2 inserts. I like having nominal sizes for these, like 3/4 of an inch, 1 inch, 1/2 inch. 5/8, I find the math a little more confusing. And this one's really nice. This is a recent acquisition. It's good for doing the chamfers. I'm using that a little bit on a job that I don't have. I thought I had it right there and I don't. And boring bar, this thing gets used a lot for doing all kinds of odd size holes. Now, I've seen offshore versions of this that have the dial backwards, and it makes work super, super confusing. If someone tried to sell me one of those, I would return it. It would just take too much time. And what else can I say? That might just be a wrap. Oh, I know. Gotta watch these things here. Morse taper holders. Depending on what one you've got, some of them have a lot of stick out. I think this one here is number 3. And you want to watch how much stick out it's got past the quilt, because otherwise you don't have that much room in a Bridgeport. So you'll soon run out of height in your milling machine. One thing I am curious about is if this is a bit lower, if it would be handy if there was a job where there's a lot of Morse taper drills getting changed out, that the drills could get changed out quicker. I don't know how that would work, but anyhow. Oh, and then I got a couple of these. These are same brand as the other ones, and I can't think of what the heck it is off the top of my mind. It's like I'm just completely drawing a